Welcome to It's All Recruiting, the show that looks at everything through the lens of recruiting. I'm your host, Jim Stroud.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's your host with the most, Jim Stroud, with another exciting episode of the It's All Recruiting podcast. Have somewhat of an interesting topic. Well, I think that every podcast I do is interesting, but this is especially interesting, I would think, to recruiters. A friend of mine who is a recruiter was in a position to look for work. And as he pursued new opportunities, some revelations came to his mind. And as we talked about it, I thought, how interesting it is for a recruiter of all people to be looking for work. Definitely gives a different kind of perspective on the job search process, so much so that I wanted to invite him over to the podcast and to share his story. So if you would, friend, please introduce yourself.
Keith True. Thrilled to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So tell me, give me a little backstory. How you entered into the job search market?
Well, I was formerly with Ronstadt SourceRight, same wonderful company that you're with, and I was on a lot of different accounts. And the last account that I was on went away. Ronstadt lost that account. Thus, I lost my position. And so I was also looking for an opportunity of a permanent basis versus just being a contractor. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to go out there and find a permanent position. I've developed these RPO recruiting skills, which sort of mesh really well with my corporate recruiting skills, which mesh really well with my agency contingency search recruiting skills. And that's how it came about.
But as you went on the market, thinking it would be pretty much a short stint of time, I think it went a little bit longer than you had hoped for. What were some of your experiences?
I think that as a recruiter, we're always used to being on the inside. And so approaching it as a candidate, you sort of see the frustrations that a candidate could possibly have and how it's important to project professionalism and kindness towards your candidates. Why it took longer? There were several opportunities that simply didn't work out. It was a timing issue sometimes. I would go through the interview process with different companies. I looked at contingency search companies. I looked at corporate recruiting also / RPO type companies. And it just didn't seem the timing was correct, or it just didn't seem like it was the right fit. For me, at this point in my career, I enjoy doing corporate RPO type recruiting. Not so much which is the bulk of my career, the contingency recruiting type search. And so I wanted to stay in, and that I had a lot of interest on the agency side, but it wasn't what I was really looking for. And I have found the hard way sometimes that you've got to put yourself in the right environment as much as you possibly can. There is no predicting how things are going to work out naturally, but it's sort of a function of I know what I don't want, and I didn't really want to be in the agency world again.
What are some things that some recruiters did? I won't say wrong. Yeah, okay, I'll say wrong. They gave a bad impression of the company because of how they treated you.
I think this is going dark on a candidate. And I'm not one of these candidates that's going to be, I understand that a lot of people apply to a position or you source a lot of candidates for a position that you're trying to fill. So you have a lot of candidates in the queue, and some, for whatever reason it may be, and it may be an innocuous reason or whatever, are better fits or the timing is better than other candidates that you may have hired a year in the past or You may hire in the future. Thus, I'm not one of these that necessarily is like, well, gosh, why wouldn't you want to hire me? And I do, of course, have that attitude. I'm very confident in my skills and my background and think I'm a great fit for everyone, but I don't take it personally if I'm not picked, because I know that I always adopt the attitude I don't have a job till I have a job. And so I don't stop talking to companies. I don't stop looking at different opportunities until I have found a job and have started work. What I didn't appreciate is when companies, on occasion, would go dark, would just disappear, fall off the map, and you just would hear nothing back from them at all. And I know that can be very frustrating for candidates. Even if to say, hey, here's a letter, just want to let you know we filled the position. That's all you got to say. I'm easy. That's all you got to tell me. Hey, I filled the position. We went with somebody else and stuff like that. I'm not going to be one of these type of people. It's like, who did you fill it with, and why didn't you pick me, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, naturally, if there's things I've done wrong or things I may have projected that were incorrect, I want to correct those things. I want to be, and I always try to be self-aware, because sometimes I'll walk out of an interview or a discussion or whatever it may be, and I think, gosh, I could have done that a little bit better, or I need to approach that from a different angle next time, or perhaps answer that question differently next time. That way, maybe I'll have a different result in that regard.
So a big issue with you was that they didn't have much follow-up, whether it was automated or personal.
Yeah.
They just didn't let you know.
It just disappeared on me, didn't let me know. That I didn't appreciate. And again, all you got to say is, we filled the position. Sometimes positions get put on hold. Things happen in requisitions and positions that occur. They get put on hold or whatever. And so at the end, it may take a little time to get that position filled. And so I think it's important to let candidates know, hey, you weren't picked, we picked somebody else, or the position has been filled, but please keep in touch with us.
Did you find that was the norm? Did you, more often than not, that was the case? They just disappeared on you?
They just basically fundamentally disappeared on me.
What about the automated response? Did you get an automatic response eventually saying that it was filled at all, or a lot of your?
Most of the time, did not
Wow.
hear anything, and I think that's a huge mistake. I think it's important. Companies should be cognizant of the candidate experience.
Mm-hmm.
They should think to themselves, how, as I want to be treated a certain way, I want to do everything I can to treat others as well. And so eventually, at one point or another, for whatever the reason may be, we're all going to find ourselves looking for a job. Sometimes it goes very fast. Sometimes it drags on a little bit and stuff like that. The interview process is long or whatever it may be, for whatever reasons, testing or whatever. I think it's important to be courteous, project a kind of a kindness. I don't expect to get a job offer from every place that I interview with. I would hope so. I'd love to have that luxury. I'd love to be in a seller's market, but that's not necessarily reality. I think it's important that companies say, hey, we filled the position, or somebody else got the position. That's all you really need to say. I think that is a bottom line, courteous thing to do. And when you interview someone, you're getting an email address. And so it's not that complicated to send an email out. The position's been filled or the position's been closed or whatever the situation may be.
Sure. Did you find that most recruiters that you spoke to were unprofessional or more professional? Like, what percentage would you give based on your experience?
I would say nobody was unprofessional.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I would call the experiences like, oh, there's no way they were rude or whatever. But I think that, and again, I'm a recruiter. I'm used to being on the other side, and I have a lot of years being on the other side. And so I think that's important for companies to convey a positive image that not everybody that they interview they're going to hire, and they want to treat everybody with courtesy, and simple courtesy is just to say, hey, we've hired somebody else. We've moved on with somebody else. And then you want to be, and then the interview process needs to be a certain degree of accommodation and decency and expectations involved. And, you know, I had one situation I do recall where a company reached out to me, within an hour of when I was supposed to be interviewed and rescheduled the interview on me and stuff like that. Now, probably my assumption is they didn't really offer up an explanation, and they did reschedule, and I did have an interview with them, but something happened. They had an important meeting come up, or someone was out unexpectedly that had to be there in those sort of interviews. But it's interesting, when I did come back and interview with them, I had really great conversations with them, but then at the end of it, they went completely dark on me. And they project themselves as, if you will, a forward-thinking, progressive type company. And I thought that doesn't mesh with the image that you're trying to portray yourself as out there.
Very interesting. So the way they treated you during the recruiting process, it colored how you saw the company as a whole.
Absolutely. Again, I'm a grown boy.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm not going to get everything that I want, but at least say, you didn't get the job. We went with somebody else. You know, somebody else is a better fit for whatever reason. And I'm not even expecting someone to give me a detailed explanation. Now, it's not that I don't appreciate it. Hey, you said this. If somebody, and sometimes on occasion, not in this process, most recent process, but in years past, I've actually and it's rare, but it does happen, interviewed a place or two, and they would say, well, you didn't get the job because of this, because you answered the question this way, or you couldn't do this or that, you know, and someone else answered that question better. They gave me detailed reasons. That is always appreciated. I don't expect that, but that is always appreciated. What I do expect is someone to say, you didn't get the job. And they don't have to call me up and say, you didn't get the job. Here's an email. We went with somebody else. Please keep in touch. You know, please keep watching our website, that sort of thing. That, to me, is just kind of a bare minimum requirement as far as looking for a position is concerned.
Yeah, and I know there are a lot of systems that recruiters use to track their applicants, and typically when they close out a rec, at the very least, everyone who has applied gets some sort of notification. So I'm wondering how many. Yeah, so I'm wondering how many of the people, how many of the companies that you spoke with at least had a bare minimum, a good ATS system that could give that feedback automatically.
Exactly, and I think that probably is a factor in it. I've worked on a lot of different ATS systems. Some do that automatically. Some force you to, as a recruiter. When you close out a requisition, it requires you to send, you know, it may be a standard boilerplate email, but it does require you to send a communication out to all the candidates that apply to the position that are attached to that requisition. And I know that may not be the case with all ATSs, but most of them it is.
Sure. ATSs, for those who don't know, are applicant tracking systems. They're systems that recruiters use to keep track of all the people who apply, otherwise known as the black hole to
Absolutely.
a lot of folks.
A couple other questions, too. Actually, one comment before going to my next question. I thought it was very interesting that you said that your opinion of the company as a whole changed because of the recruitment process. I wonder how many companies consider that when they have their meetings with HR and recruiters and so forth to make sure they treat everybody as professionally and as positively as they can, because the people that they are turning down for jobs could potentially be future customers or future business partners on down the road. If they are not working for the company, they might work for another company and be in a position to do business with you, and they won't do business with you because you treated them so badly in the recruiting process. I think people overlook how important that aspect of recruiting is to the company overall.
Well, it's an old adage. You remember if you're treated poorly, if you get poor customer service. More so, you have a simple expectation of good customer service. You may not get the answers you're always looking for or the outcome you're always looking for, but at the very minimum, you expect decent, good customer service. And I think that companies should approach the hiring process the same way, even on people they don't hire, just to be upfront, to be straightforward. I mean, you don't have to completely pull the curtain back and give all the, inside the baseball kind of details about what's going on in your company and stuff like that, but always be cognizant of how you treat people and convey to them that, hey, I appreciate your time. We went with a different candidate. That's all you got to do. And that will stick with people also. Hey, I didn't get the job here at XYZ company, but they were nice to me. Yeah. I did get an interview, or I did have a phone conversation, or at the very least, they sent me a very nice form letter saying, you didn't get the job, we hired somebody else, please keep applying to positions. That's all you got to do.
Were all the interactions you had with recruiters in response to your applying for a job, or did they see your resume somewhere and contact you?
When I am out there looking for a position, I always approach it first off. I reach out to people that I know on a personal, professional level to say, hey, I'm out there looking around right now. Do you know of any companies looking for recruiters right now or sourcers? And so I approach it from that fashion. I also do apply directly to positions. I do also work with recruiters who place recruiters. I do all the above because you never know how long a search is going to last. You never know where you're going to find that lead from, and that will lead you to the position that you're looking for. That's why you've always got to pursue all avenues that you possibly can to look for a position.
Sure, I was wondering. Yeah, definitely. And I was asking that because I was wondering if you received better or worse service depending on how you were engaged. Like, for example, if you applied for a job and a recruiter found your resume in the black hole, did they treat you differently than when they found you, say, from your LinkedIn profile and called you?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when they, and I'm using this kind of loosely, if they have sourced you, if you will, they've gone out and they're looking for people with a certain type of background, and you came up and they reach out directly to you, they're much more engaged in working with you through the interview process and potentially hiring you than if you're just another resume, another number applying to their position and stuff like that. There's an absolute difference to that. Sure.
I guess it's sort of like the forbidden fruit kind of thing. Like, if they feel they have to work for you, then they'll treat you better. So they sign you in.
Well, and I think also as a candidate, I think that as a candidate, I'm going to have a bit more interest perhaps in that company because I'm thinking to myself, well, they evidently want to bring me on potentially and hire me. I'm not just casting my line into their pond. They're casting their line into my pond, trying to catch me. And so there's a certain degree of flattery there, if you will.
So from a negotiation standpoint, would you tell people not to apply for a job, but rather just put their profile out there on LinkedIn and other places so that recruiters can find them? I mean, what would you say?
I absolutely. I think it's always interesting to me, people that are looking for a job, even recruiters who have, if you will, an incomplete LinkedIn profile. I think it's important that you be as detailed as you possibly can and put out there front and center ways for people that even those that are not contacted to you to be able to reach out to you. You know, i.e., you put your email address on there, or you put an email address on there, you know, xyz@hotmail.com, and that email address, anybody that's reaching out to that, that's an email address you use for people that are trying to get a hold of you to maybe talk to you about a position or something like that, or a job opportunity. I always have found that amazing, that people that are looking for a job, and then I'll go look them up on LinkedIn. I found them some other way, and I'll look them on LinkedIn, and it's just the bare minimum, because you can say what you want about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still the primary source for recruiters out there. And then, of course, you can go into other things like, you know, you've got to be out there networking. You know, you've got to just, if this is the profession that you want to be in, then you've got to treat it as a profession, and you've got to be constantly trying to grow professionally and out there networking, getting to know others in your industry and industry leaders like you, Jim. You know, it's important that people do that, so you get to know them, you get to know what industry trends are, and they get to know you also, rather than, oh, I'm just somebody punching a clock, basically.
What do you say to those people who are shy and they don't necessarily feel comfortable with branding themselves online and writing articles or blogging or networking with people because they're just too shy or they're too busy working to network? What would you tell them?
Nobody says you have to do as much, say, as you do in order to make yourself approachable out there. I don't write articles and or blogs or do podcasts from your perspective, or you know, but I do go to networking meetings, and I do keep my profile up and detailed as much as I possibly can at all times. You know, there's definitely degrees, but I think that if you're a recruiter and you have a very bare bones profile out there on LinkedIn or out there in general, then maybe recruiting's not really the career you should be in, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I get from that the bottom line is you should do something, even if it's a small effort. You should do something.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to do something, and it's, you know, like they say, you put your picture on there. Your position change, you put changes in positions on there, and you put ways for people, whether it be a phone number or your email address on there, you put it on there prominently so that people can easily find it easily so people can reach out to you outside of LinkedIn instead of maybe having to use an email or something like that. Because, again, as recruiters who are mostly on LinkedIn, recruiters, looking for recruiters or looking for other positions and stuff like that. But I don't want to, if somebody wants to find me about a job, a great job or something like that, I don't want to make it difficult for them. I want to make it easy. In the end, maybe I won't take that position, or in the end, maybe they decide, no, you're not the right person, Keith. But, you know, I do want to have that opportunity to say no, or I do want to give them the opportunity to call me up and make me that big fat job offer.
Sure. Now, after all this experience you've been through recently, and I know you're currently employed now and happy and all that, how has your job search experience changed how you recruit now that you're back on the other side and you're talking to candidates every day? How's all of your recent experience changed how you've done things, or have you always done the things you've said the other recruiters are not doing?
I've always thought to myself how I would want to be treated as a candidate,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to treat candidates in the same fashion, to be transparent as much as is appropriate, to be transparent about the process from the client side. But I think it's just important to keep in touch with candidates, keep them up to date on the process, help them be patient, help them through the process, because my job is to fill positions, and my job is to fill positions in a timely fashion. I'm graded and assessed on all those things. And so it's important to me that if somebody reaches out to a candidate, I didn't get that job at that company that Keith is recruiting for, but Keith was a nice guy. I knew what was going on and stuff like that, and I'll keep trying to get a job there at that company. I mean, I consider that. They may not necessarily consider that, but I consider that a success.
Wise words indeed. Well, thank you, Keith True, for being on the It's All Recruiting podcast. You are appreciated, sir.
Thank you, Jim. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening. If you were not there, then I would be here talking to myself. So thank you for that. If you would, check out the links in the podcast description because they are there for you. Finally, if you love what you heard, hate what you heard, or not quite sure what you just heard, I want to know about it. Connect with me on Twitter at Jim Stroud, or LinkedIn, or Google+, or pretty much anywhere you find me online. I'm everywhere. Okay, enough of that. Until next time, one last word spoken 3 times to my people at Randstad Sourceright. Love, love, love.